Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. Japanese aircraft destroy 8 battleships, kill about 2,400 Americans, and cripple the Pacific Fleet. In Tokyo, military leaders celebrate. They believe they've neutralized America's Navy. They believe they've bought time. They believe the war is winnable now. But 3 American aircraft carriers weren't at Pearl Harbor that day. They're out at sea. And back in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Seattle, American factories are about to start running 24 hours a day. Women, immigrants, retirees, they're about to build more planes in the next 4 years than Japan had built in its entire modern history. Japan's leaders think they've won the opening punch. They have no idea what's coming next. So before we dive in, pause for a second. Make a prediction. Could Japan have won the Pacific War? Or was December 7th, 1941 the moment they sealed their fate? Hold that answer in your head, because by the end, you might change your mind. If you're into history that digs into economics and power, not just battles, hit subscribe. To understand Pearl Harbor, you have to understand what Japan feared most in 1941. Not America's soldiers, not America's admirals. Japan feared a stopwatch: oil. Japan had been fighting in China for years. That war was not a quick campaign, it was a grinding furnace. It consumed men, money, ammunition, and fuel every single day. And Japan's fuel situation was fragile from the beginning. Japan had almost no domestic oil. It imported most of what it used, and a huge portion of those imports came from one place: the United States. That meant Japan's war machine, its navy, its air force, its transport ships, was ultimately dependent on American tankers and American policy. Then Japan expanded again. In the summer of 1941, Japan moved deeper into French Indochina, and that move triggered the economic response Japan had feared. The United States froze Japanese assets. Britain did the same. The Dutch government in exile followed. In practice, Japan's access to oil collapsed. Now Japan's leaders were staring at a brutal math problem. They had enough fuel for roughly 1 year to 1.5 years of operations. After that, the Imperial Navy becomes a museum piece, still floating but not moving. And for Japan, the Navy wasn't just another branch. It was the spine of the empire. Without the Navy, Japan couldn't defend supply lines, couldn't protect shipping, and couldn't keep an overseas war alive. So the leadership faced 2 choices. Choice 1, withdraw from China, negotiate, accept humiliation, and watch the military government lose legitimacy at home. Choice 2, go all in. Seize oil fields in the south, especially the Dutch East Indies, and gamble everything on speed and surprise. They chose the gamble, but there was one massive obstacle. If Japan invaded the Dutch East Indies, the United States would likely intervene, and the geography was cruel. American forces in the Philippines sat across Japan's supply routes. Any oil Japan seized in the south would have to travel north across sea lanes exposed to American airfields, American submarines, and American warships. Meanwhile, the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor could strike convoys and threaten Japanese operations. Japan couldn't take the oil and hold it unless it neutralized American power first. So the decision hardens into a plan. Strike Pearl Harbor, disable the fleet, buy time, grab the oil, build a defensive wall, and then force America to negotiate. The most important mind behind this strategy was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Yamamoto wasn't a fantasy thinker. He had studied in the United States. He understood American industry and American political culture better than most men in Tokyo. And he feared one thing above all: a long war. Because a long war meant production. A long war meant steel. A long war meant shipyards and aircraft plants and training pipelines. And in that world, Japan was outmatched. Yamamoto warned Japan's leadership in plain terms. He believed Japan could dominate for 6 months to a year, but after that, he had no confidence. His warning wasn't about bravery. It was about math. America had more people, a much larger economy, and a vastly larger industrial base. So Japan's plan was not to invade California, not to conquer Washington. Japan's plan was to manipulate cost, hit the fleet hard enough to delay American counterattack for 6 months to 1 year. In that time, seize the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, Guam, Wake, then build a defensive perimeter across the Pacific, fortified islands, airfields, coastal guns, submarines, mines. So when America finally pushes back, it bleeds. And the bleeding is the point. Japan's leaders believed that if the price in American lives and ships was high enough, the American public would demand an end. They weren't trying to win forever. They were trying to win a deal. They were trying to make America say, this isn't worth it. That belief rested on one critical assumption: that Americans would not endure a long, brutal Pacific War. and Pearl Harbor would prove the exact opposite. Early morning, Hawaiian time. Japanese carriers sit far north of Oahu. The first wave, around 180 aircraft, rises into the sky. Then the attack begins. Torpedoes slam into battleships. Dive bombers scream down through smoke and flak. The USS Arizona is struck, and the ship becomes an instant firestorm. A bomb reaches the ammunition storage. A catastrophic explosion follows. Over 1,000 men die in minutes. The USS Oklahoma takes multiple torpedoes and flips. Hundreds of sailors are trapped inside. Within hours, 8 battleships are sunk or heavily damaged. American aircraft are destroyed on the ground in rows, unable to take off. The death toll climbs rapidly. Japan's losses are comparatively small, dozens of aircraft, roughly 130 men, and 5 midget submarines. In the short term, Tokyo sees a triumph. But the real story of Pearl Harbor is what Japan didn't finish. The aircraft carriers weren't there. The massive fuel storage tanks, millions of gallons, survived. The repair docks survived. The submarine base survived. Japan damaged battleships, but left the infrastructure that could restore American power. And that mistake matters because ships can be repaired. Fuel can be used. Submarines can be launched. Pearl Harbor didn't destroy America's ability to fight. It enraged America into choosing total war. American opinion had been divided before the attack. After the attack, it snapped into one direction. Congress declared war. Negotiation became politically toxic. America was not going to compromise. America was going to build and then punish. Here's the part most people miss. Pearl Harbor was dramatic, but battleships weren't the heart of the future. Aircraft carriers were, and the carriers survived. In 1941, naval power is shifting. The decisive weapon is no longer the big gun line. It's the flight deck. It's aircraft launched at distance. It's scouting, striking, and retreating. That is why the missing carriers are so critical. Japan crippled battleships, but did not eliminate the carrier threat. And the carriers would become the spearhead of America's counterattack. Even worse for Japan, Pearl Harbor left America's submarine force intact. And submarines would become the silent executioners of Japan's economy. Because Japan was an island empire. It depended on shipping lanes. It depended on tankers. It depended on cargo. Cut the shipping, and Japan bleeds to death. And that is exactly what happens. Now we get to the real war. The war behind the war. The production war? Because modern wars are not only won by tactics. They are won by replacement. Can you replace what you lose faster than your enemy? And in that contest, Japan is fighting a giant. Start with steel. America's steel output is enormous compared to Japan's. Steel becomes ships. Steel becomes tanks. Steel becomes aircraft frames. Steel becomes ammunition. Then oil. America has massive domestic production. Japan has almost none. Even when Japan captures oil fields in the south, it still has to move that oil across contested seas. And that requires tankers. Japan never has enough tankers. And American submarines turn the sea lanes into a killing zone. Now aircraft production. Across the war, the United States produces aircraft on a scale Japan cannot approach. Year after year, America's output accelerates. Japan increases production too, but not fast enough. And Japan's pilots, its most precious resource, are not replaceable at factory speed. Shipbuilding tells the same story. America builds not only warships, but the cargo fleet to supply the warships. It's not just the spear. It's the entire supply chain behind the spear. And that supply chain is what Japan cannot match. Japanese planners weren't stupid. They knew America was larger. They knew America had more factories. So why did they believe their plan could work? Because they were betting on psychology. Japan had defeated a much larger Russia decades earlier. In that war, Japan delivered a crushing naval blow. Russia negotiated. Japan believed the same logic would apply. Hit the fleet. Raise the cost. Make the enemy tired. Force a deal. But America in 1941 is not Russia in the early 20th century. Pearl Harbor does not exhaust America. It radicalizes America. It creates a national mission, a moral cause, a hunger for payback. And America has something Russia did not have in that moment. A vast industrial base protected by oceans capable of expanding even while fighting. There is another twist Japan did not fully control. Germany. 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Germany declares war on the United States. Now America is fighting not just Japan, but Germany and Italy too. And America still has the capacity to fight both. American strategy becomes Germany first. Defeat the most dangerous enemy in Europe while holding Japan in the Pacific, then crush Japan with full weight later. That means Japan is not even facing the full American machine at first. And Japan is still losing the long game. Now we reach the moment Yamamoto feared, Midway. About 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan tries to destroy the American carrier force. The target is Midway Island. Japan wants a decisive battle, one clean victory that breaks America's offensive ability. Japan brings a powerful fleet, including 4 major carriers. America brings 3 carriers. But America has an advantage that changes the entire story. Code breaking. American analysts intercept and interpret Japanese plans. They know the target. They know the timing. So America sets a trap. On the day of battle, American dive bombers catch Japanese carriers at the worst possible moment. Decks crowded, aircraft fueled and armed. In minutes, multiple Japanese carriers are turned into infernos. A 4th goes down later. Japan loses ships, but the real wound is deeper. Japan loses veteran pilots and trained aircrews, people who take years to produce. You can build a ship faster than you can rebuild a culture of elite naval aviation. From this point on, Japan is fighting with a shrinking core of experience. Early in the war, Japanese pilots are famous for skill and discipline. They have high training standards. They have extensive flight hours. They have combat confidence. American pilots early on are improving, but still catching up. Then the industrial machine shifts the balance. America scales training. America scales fuel. America scales aircraft production. America scales replacement. Japan cannot. As the war drags on, Japan's experienced pilots die faster than they can be replaced. Training hours drop. New pilots arrive with dangerously low experience. America moves in the opposite direction. By the middle of 1944, American pilots have far more training, better aircraft, better radar support, and better logistics. And then the air war becomes a one-sided collapse. This is the core truth. Japan's early war advantage is quality. Better pilots, better experience, often better early tactics. But quality is not enough in an attrition war. An attrition war is won by whoever can replace losses faster. Even if Japan wins a battle, America replaces the ships. Even if Japan shoots down planes, America builds more planes. Even if Japan destroys aircrews, America trains more aircrews. Japan's economy hits maximum capacity early. By 1943, Japan is already stripping civilian life to feed the military. But the output still can't match America. The United States expands while fighting. That's the difference. Japan is sprinting on a limited fuel tank. America is building a highway while driving on it. Now return to your prediction. Could Japan have won the Pacific War? Only if one thing happens. America quits. Only if the cost is so high that America negotiates. But Pearl Harbor makes quitting almost impossible. It turns the war into a national mission. And once the war becomes industrial, the gap is fatal. Even if Midway goes differently, even if Japan sinks American carriers, America builds replacements. The shipyards keep going. The training schools keep producing. The factories keep turning out aircraft. Japan cannot match that momentum. That is why Yamamoto's warning matters. He understood the arc of the war. Japan could run wild early. But after that, the math kills it. So what was Pearl Harbor? Was it rational? Was it desperation? Or was it strategic suicide? Japan was cornered by oil and politics. Backing down risked internal collapse. Attacking risked national destruction. They chose the gamble, and the gamble failed, not because Japan lacked bravery, but because Japan tried to win a production war against a country that could outbuild it in every category that mattered. So I want your answer. Was Pearl Harbor a calculated move that made sense at the time, or a fatal misread of American will and American industry? Leave your take in the comments. And if you want more history told through economics, logistics, and industrial power, like and subscribe.